Now, fluid retention and increased right atrial pressure. So, in the partial recovery, there is fluid retention. You have to accept a heart or compensated heart failure. Okay, it's a suitable example that you have to accept this compensated heart failure with 50% of its its good deeds and 50% of its bad habits. That is fluid retention and increased right atrial pressure. But fluid retention is further divided into moderate and into excess. So excess is harmful, moderate isn't harmful. Okay, we're moving to next point. Cardiac reserve is reduced in compensated heart failure. Okay, now how is your heart compensated? Instantaneous effect of cardiac damage. What is the instantaneous effect? It's compensation by sympathetic nervous system. When your heart is damaged, within the few seconds, your signals are sent to activate your sympathetic reflexes. There is chronic compensation by fluid retention. Okay, as you are medicos, so please, it's not chorionic, it's chronic. Don't confuse physio with embryo, okay? So it's chronic compensation by fluid retention. What is the compensation by fluid retention? You all are well aware in a previous slide we discussed that moderate fluid retention. I'm again repeating that moderate fluid retention shows compensated heart failure, but excess is harmful. As the graph indicates, look right over here, the sympathetic stimulation is done and your right atrial pressure continues to increases and fluid is retained, and this is all the partial recovery of the heart that shows the compensated heart failure or compensated heart. It's actually your compensated heart. Got it? It's now decompensated heart failure or decompensated heart. Both will be covered in this topic. Severely damaged heart. Your heart is not at its good conditions. It have extended to its limit. It is not compensated by the sympathetic nervous reflexes and by the fluid retention. So the fluid continues to be retained, and whenever the fluid retains, what happens? A very important thing, that is edema develops. It shows decompensated heart failure. Your heart isn't compensated, so here you aren't lucky that the heart failure is not being recovered. No, it will not even partially recovery of the heart. It's totally decompensation of the heart. You are suffering from acute heart failure, chronic heart failure, and the last stages of heart failure, that will simply lead to the death of a person. Like it's being death. Got it? Cardiac reserve is also reduced in the decompensated heart failure. It's actually too much reduced. Here we should set it's like almost finished. The cardiac reserve almost finished. It's like no more cardiac reserve. Now, why your heart is becoming not partially recovered? Because it's last stages in which there is progressive retention of the fluid. The fluid continues to retain. There is elevation of the mean systemic filling pressure. Okay, so I'm again repeating that in the partial recovery of the heart, we said that there is increase in the mean systemic filling pressure. So in the heart failure, the mean systemic filling pressure continues to increase. It doesn't decrease at any point. There is elevation of right atrial pressure due to systemic filling pressure. Right atrial pressure increases. Due to this, the venous return increases. And as we said that when there was moderate retention of the heart, the right atrial pressure causes the venous return to increase, causes the veins to distend. So when the veins of heart were distending, more of the blood was passing. But a stage, everything has its limits, so never cross your limits. Okay, so the stretching of the heart continues. By the continual distension of the veins, the heart is stretched and stretched. When we're gonna Now compare the compensated and decompensated heart. Normal moderate fluid, distension of the veins, and the fluid continues to flow, the blood continues to flow without the venous resistance. But progressive retention of the fluid, overstretching of the heart, edema of the lungs. The final stage, edema starts to develop. And clinically, how do you get that your heart is not in the compensated condition? It is showing the excessive retention of the fluid, and this is decompensated heart failure. How will you suggest your patients? So you will ask him clinically to show you, or you'll hear the voices, you'll hear the noise created by the lungs edema. Okay, the water, it shows bubbling rails, okay, it's bubbling rails. Again saying it's bubbling rails, and the bubbling rails are actually the crackling sound that is heard in the edema of the lungs. So clinically, you will get the point. Your patient has decompensated heart failure because you're able to hear the crackling sound that is bubbling rails. And the other thing that happens so far is dyspnea, air hunger. That is, you have the difficulty in breathing, and very important, when you are doing when a decompensated heart failure patient is doing exercise, there is no survival rate. Because you are suffering from dyspnea, air hunger. You want more and more oxygen. You are running from the shortness of breath. But it's all happening in decompensated heart failure, and the person is no more. Okay. Very interestingly, as we compare the compensated heart failure graph, now I'm going to discuss the decompensated heart failure graph. Similarly, you can see right over here a point A that is showing the cardiac output of 2.5 liter, and the atrial pressure is almost 3. You can consider here 3. Now what's happening right over here? In point A, you can observe 2.5 cardiac output, that is, your heart is damaged. But there is increase in the right atrial pressure. As you all know that in the damaged heart, right atrial pressure is gonna increase, there is no decrease. Okay, now at point B, what is gonna happen? You can see there is increase in the curve, and whenever there is increase in the curve, you can guess that there is the activation of this sympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic stimulation causes the increase in the cardiac output, that is almost 4 liters per minute. But there is increase in the right atrial pressure, that is 5 mm of Hg. So your right atrial pressure is going to increase because there is progressive increase in the mean systematic pressure, there is progressive increase in the right atrial pressure, there is progressive increase in the fluid retention, and everything's going to increase slowly. But at this very initial stage, your sympathetic stimulation is capable of the recovery of heart by increasing the cardiac output. Now, what is going to happen at point C? You can see right over here, it's more than the cardiac output is increased more. It's like 4.2 liter per minute, more than 4, due to sympathetic stimulation, and the right atrial pressure is almost 7. It's 7 mm of Hg. So don't consider I have written 1. It's 7 mm of Hg. At point C, you can see 7 mm of Hg right over here. It's 4.2 liter per minute. Now at point D, your cardiac output remains same. Why your cardiac output is same? You can see because the cardiac output is same, because there is no more effect of the sympathetic stimulation. Basically, remember we are discussing decompensated heart failure. There's a critical cardiac output level for normal fluid balance. So at point D, you can observe that the pressure still increases. It's almost 9, the right atrial pressure, but the cardiac output is still 4.2. So at the point D, you can say there is survival rate. There is still partial recovery, but there is no increase in the cardiac output. 4.2 liter per minute is close to 5 liter per minute, but it is not extending its ratio from 4.2 because slowly the sympathetic effect is gonna decrease. Now, what is gonna happen next? At point E, you can see it's 11 mm of Hg increase. The right atrial pressure is increasing. But right, what is gonna happen here? The curve is moving down. So have you observed that at point E, your pressure is decreasing? Your cardiac output is decreasing? I'm gonna clear point E. That look at point D you were like 4.2. But what is gonna happen at point E is 3 liter per minute. Your cardiac output is decreasing. So when you can see it has reached to its maximum level, there is decrease, that's 3 liter per minute. And there is increase in the cardiac output. It's almost 12 and 11. Now you can see that at till point D, you were able to see that their heart is in the compensated state. Your heart is showing compensated heart. But at the point E clears that no, your heart is showing decompensated state. It's a decompensated heart because there is decrease in the cardiac output. Your heart is not able to pump enough blood to meet the body's need, but the right atrial pressure is increasing. Now the point F, there is a sudden decrease in the curve and we get a point F. So having 16 mm of Hg right atrial pressure and almost 2.5 liter per minute cardiac output. What has happened? Sudden fall. So how you get that this is decompensated heart failure? There is overstretching of the heart. As I told you in the previous slide that what happens in the decompensated heart failure, there is overstretching of the heart. Like you can see right over here, the point overstretching. Stretching means overstretching of the heart and progressive retention of the fluid. Now the fluid has reached to its excess level. We were talking that excess of everything is bad. So now at point F, it's clear that your fluid has reached, the fluid retention is at its maximum level and right atrial pressure is still continue to be increased and your cardiac output decreases to 2.4 liter per minute. So it shows decompensated heart failure. Now what is happening after F? Let me clear this to you. F is failing of heart, and when the heart fails, death of your patient happens. So remember, F is the failing of the heart. The point F denotes that there is the decompensation of the heart and death is due to decompensated heart failure. So you can remember the relation of you must say point F, failure of the heart, and leading to the death of the patient or person due to decompensated heart. Okay. Now, don't worry, it's medical science and even the decompensated heart can be treated. How? Cardiotonic drugs. It's an example of a cardiotonic drug, Digitalis. The treatment can be done of decompensated heart failure. Here, let me tell you that this death can be prevented by preventing this by Digitalis. So another D's coming right over here. Due to failure, death was occurring due to decompensated heart failure, but decompensation can be reversed by Digitalis. So it's another thing from D. So you have to remember these two letters that are very important, D and F. Okay. Now, the treatment can be done by Digitalis, that is strengthens the heart itself and allows the heart to pump more and more blood. It decreases the venous return. And it also there's adequate quantities of the blood is pumped. It is a cardiotonic drug, especially it's used to treat the decompensated heart failure. You know, compensated heart failure is treated itself by the heart due to the sympathetic stimulation and moderate quantities of fluid retention. But when there is excess fluid, your sympathetic stimulation doesn't work. So then we medicate the patient by giving him the cardiotonic drugs. For example, you can see Digitalis that strengthens the heart. The other type of drugs are diuretic drugs. We are giving the patient diuretic drugs to increase the kidney excretion, because when there is excess of fluid retention, there is decrease in kidney excretion. So we want to increase this kidney excretion, so we are giving diuretic drugs. What is the mechanism of action of a cardiotonic drug? How it works? First of all, I want to tell you that cardiotonic drugs, cardiotonic glycosides, and Digitalis, these are the drugs we have given this to patient. What are their main function? They strengthens the heart contraction by increasing the calcium ions in the muscle fiber. Okay, there is the increase in the contraction by the calcium ions. What is another important function? It's inhibition of sodium potassium ATPase. Now, when there is the patient suffering from decompensated heart failure, we give Digitalis. Digitalis strengthens his heart by increasing the calcium ions and inhibiting the sodium potassium ATPase. Now, when the sodium potassium is inhibited, there is increase in the intracellular sodium concentration. Sodium is not able to move out of the cell. It also slows down the function or depresses the sodium-calcium exchange pump. Now, the sodium is more and more inside, it will throw calcium more and more outside of intracellular spaces. When the calcium is extruded from the cell by sodium-calcium exchange pump, what happens that there is accumulation of sodium inside, as sodium-calcium pump depends upon the sodium gradient. It depends upon the sodium gradient. So you can say the pump relies on the sodium gradient. So sodium inside as sodium exchange pump. You can see a diagram right over here that the sodium calcium exchange has been coming slow. The calcium is more and more moving towards the muscle fiber, and sodium is retained inside the cell. But one more important thing, if your heart is in the failing condition, when it's like last stages, the cardiotonic drugs aren't affecting, what happens that sarcoplasmic reticulum, what's happening? Sarcoplasmic reticulum fails to accumulate the normal quantities of calcium and does not release enough calcium for muscle contraction. Okay, so muscle contraction is inhibited. Got my point? Again, I'm repeating. Filling of the heart equals to it's a person and it's death of a person. Now, filling of a heart is death of the person, and it shows that sarcoplasmic reticulum fails to accumulate normal quantities of calcium. It fails to accumulate normal quantities of calcium as the sodium-calcium exchange pump is working too fastly and the sodium-potassium ATPase isn't inhibited. There is the proper exchange of sodium and calcium, so calcium is not released for the enough muscle contraction. Now, what are the effects of Digitalis? We have discussed the failing of the heart, the negative side, but positivity is too important in life, so we're going to discuss the positive effects of Digitalis. There is a depression of sodium-calcium exchange pump. Sodium-calcium becomes slow. There's inhibition of sodium-potassium ATPase. And now there is increase in the calcium concentration for muscle contraction. So that's why I was telling you that the Digitalis has the positive effect, that the patient who is suffering from decompensated heart failure should be given Digitalis, so that when you're giving the patient Digitalis, its survival rate increases. You get more calcium ions for the muscle contraction. Now muscle fiber intracellular calcium level rises. Calcium is moving towards the muscle fiber, and there's increase in the intracellular level of calcium. Now thank you so much. It was all about the compensated heart failure, decompensated heart failure, and overall cardiac failure. Thank you.